This is Michael Woodward, and this is Season 2, Episode 49 of the Jumble Think Podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumble Think Podcast, a podcast focused on telling the stories of dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. Along the way, we give you some tips and ideas of how you can chase your own big ideas and dreams and change the world around you. Our guest on today's episode is Ryan Williams. More about Ryan in a moment. Next week on the podcast, our guests are Michael Levitt, who is an author and the founder of Breakfast Leadership, and Leon Logothetis, who is the creator and star of The Kindness Diaries, which you can find on Netflix. Both episodes are absolutely incredible, so make sure you come back next week for more of the Jumble Think Podcast. Now let's dive into today's episode with Ryan Williams. Hey there, welcome to the Jumble Think Podcast. My name is Michael Woodward, and we have an incredible episode with Ryan Williams ahead in a moment. But before we jump in, I want to encourage you, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, swing on over, click the subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode of the Jumble Think Podcast. If you like iTunes or Apple Podcasts, it's even easier. Jumblethink.com/iTunes. Again, that's jumblethink.com/iTunes. Take you right to the app, right in iTunes or Apple Podcasts, and then you can click that subscribe button. You can do the same thing for Spotify. Jumblethink.com/Spotify. Again, that's jumblethink.com/Spotify. It'll take you right to Spotify, and you can click subscribe. You can also find the Jumble Think Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, and wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Now let's learn a little bit more about today's guest, Ryan Williams. My guest today is Ryan Williams. Ryan, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Excited to have you on.
Michael, pumped to be here. Ready to roll.
Tell us a little bit about your business name and what you do.
Yeah, my business name is Influencer Economy Consulting, which is inspired by my book, The Influencer Economy, which is helping people to launch, collaborate, and thrive with their ideas in the modern digital age. And I help people, the problem I solve is I help people tell better stories and find out their undervalued stories and tell stories like a badass, and then use that storytelling structure to find alignment and picking platforms for people to expand, grow influence, and collaborate to take what they're doing to a bigger level in the new economy.
So cool. And influence economy, I think, is something that people are wanting to do more of, but they don't really know what that means. So we're going to dive into that in segment 2 more, but I want to get a little bit more of your story right now. You are obviously doing something you're passionate about, but how did you get there? Because your story is pretty inspirational.
Yeah, I got here. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, in a flyover state in the Midwest, and loved growing up there. And now I live in California, so my life's taken a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah.
And when I went to, growing up, I was always a curious kid, and went out of my way to find things to push the envelope. And I interviewed Barbara Bush when I was in 5th grade because she came to our school because of the Iowa caucus, and that was remarkable. And then I actually met Gorbachev when he came to my high school in Connecticut. In the late 90s. So I always had these funny encounters with people that I didn't really think much about. And then later in life, I was graduating college, no idea what I wanted to do. And I struggled with clinical depression, and I was doing stand-up comedy simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I will let you and your listeners be the judge if I was funny or not. You can imagine what it was like, me being on stage and not feeling the effects of the crowd or reading the room, but just putting myself out there. And, my room was in my apartment. I was living in Washington, D.C. I had beer bottles all over the floor. I had note cards all over the desk for my comedy jokes. And I had linens, stacked up all over my apartment for weeks, not making my bed. I really struggled to breathe, and realized I didn't have to be the star when I was doing stand-up. And so I could be behind the scenes. And I marketed the shows like nobody in Washington, D.C. or in the Mid-Atlantic region for comedy festivals, dive bars, anything really to get a room of people to laugh. I excelled at this.
Yeah.
And so that was really one of my first career pivots, where I realized, marketing was very much a forte of what I could do and help other people to get their voice out there.
So cool. So cool. And that journey was very accidental. You're kind of floating through life, and now you live a very intentional life. And as you go through this journey of depression, stand up, and then really understanding who you are, how did this spark of passion to help others achieve that same kind of awareness and ability for them to step into the influence that they're supposed to have? How did that aha moment start for you?
That's a great question. And I will start by saying I'm a middle child. Always been a facilitator and a peacemaker and someone who works to elevate others to get along. That's just my my birth order, I think, affected that a lot. And when I was, solving problems, I worked for a lot of tech startups in Los Angeles. One was acquired by Disney. I was the first employee there we helped launch Pixar on social media with promoted tweets and Facebook apps to sell tickets for Toy Story 3. And I promoted the movie Up, if you remember that one.
Yeah, great movie.
Getting like tens of millions of views on YouTube, doing media buying. And then I went to Machinima, another tech media startup that Warner Brothers acquired, and that was a video game network. We were getting...
Yeah, they're the people behind Minecraft, right?
Minecraft, yeah. We helped market all these games, and we had 4 billion video views a month.
Wow.
Of people consuming our content. And so I found that I was really good at navigating, as an organizational development major. So I was always good at tying together different parts of organizations that didn't talk. And I found social media as that currency because no one knew how to use Facebook or Twitter or Instagram in the early days, or even MySpace back then. And social media was the tying platform for people in the company to talk because you had to align your goals. And that was the first time I realized that I could actually do this in a way that was beneficial for organizations and, bring my marketing and comedy back full circle and my degree in college and, being, more of a curious kid, and embracing that.
That's so cool. And being able to have that journey. I mean, you've had so much success and great impact on your side of things and working with these amazing companies like Disney and Warner Brothers and all the companies in between like Pixar. And so through that process, I'm sure that you've gotten to moments where you just feel like this is an incredible story of finding fulfillment or significance or purpose in what you're doing. For you, what is that place of meaning that you're really finding in doing what you do?
Yeah, I like the word purpose. I think was a great way to frame all this because it's so easy to get lost in your passions.
Yeah.
And we're both passionate about, podcasting, but that's only part of what we do.
Right.
And I know people that got lost in podcasting and they're just in the weeds and they're not making any money and they think it's helping them. And so I think that purpose really matters. And for me, I think that what I'm very, motivated by is helping other people to raise their profiles, their status, and create opportunities.
Yeah.
And that comes through collaboration. And I have an uncanny ability to do cold email outreach to important people.
Yeah.
And get them to react.
Okay.
And so I can write a very good cold email to pitch influencers and figuring out what to give people, what to ask for people, and how to build relationships in the long run versus a quick deal, which everyone, as you know, in California, from Silicon Valley to Los Angeles, want quick deals. And that's the opposite of my philosophy.
Okay. That's pretty incredible. Now, you have been doing this for a while, but what is one challenge that you're currently working to overcome in your own business and what you're doing?
A challenge that I know you can empathize with is I have a lot of income coming in that's supplemental.
Okay.
And so it's hard to turn down work, but if it's not a big enough retainer, and I'm fortunate to be in this position, but it's hard to turn down work. And I work with a lot of people that I say, "Oh, you're my friend. I want to help you."
Yeah.
And it's not like I have a friend who's helping me price out my consulting offering.
Yeah.
And he's like, "You don't need any more of these clients that are, a lot of work for less money, but they're your friends."
Yeah.
And so you really have to figure out like where you're going to get your bigger, your whales, as they call them in Vegas, the people that spend at your casino.
Yeah.
And I think I think, I imagine you feel the same way.
Yeah, it's so hard because you want to help people. I mean, that's, at least for me, really part of my core is this desire to help. And sometimes the right answer to help is to say no, because you're never going to be able to really help them in the way that they need, because they're not right for you. They're not the right customer, but because they're a friend, you make that concession and it turns out to really be bad for everyone.
Yeah, you waste both parties' time. So I'm a firm believer in making things a win-win.
You're right.
And trying to find, and I won't pitch you, and I hope you don't pitch me, just in general speaking, unless it's a win-win for both of us to opt in and collaborate and make it beneficial. And whether that's money as a transaction where you pay me for my service, or we trade and barter, or even I just help you for the sake of it, it's got to have our own self-interest aligned to make sure that it works.
And I love the word collaboration. We're going to dive more into that in segment 2, and how collaboration is critical for this journey of entrepreneurship and influence in the influence economy. I want to close this segment and talk a little bit about what is the future of what you're doing. What's the next big goal or next thing that you're looking towards in what you do?
My next big goal is to get the stories of other people out there more through my books, my talks, workshops, and then, through that, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I have a lot of experience public speaking because I've done stand-up comedy, 50 times and perform at the Improv. And
right.
I was actually, I worked at the door. I was a doorman at the Improv too.
That's crazy.
And I've seen
wow.
300 comedy sets, from Chris Tucker to Dave Chappelle, Mitch Hedberg, all these Brian Regan, brilliant comedians, right? So I know how to interact with crowds. And I feel like that's something that I'm really focused on, creating bigger dents in the world around being in rooms with people and sharing stories, whether it's public speaking, workshops, or trainings.
It's so, so cool. And we're going to dive more into the world of influence and what Ryan's doing in a moment. So we'll be back with Ryan Williams and our second segment where we get into the weeds of this topic. So what does it take to turn your big ideas and dreams into a reality? Well, we would love to help you if you're a new entrepreneur, or if you have a new idea and you're trying to make it a reality and you're not quite sure what to do next. Well, the Jumblethink team is here to help. Swing on over to jumblethink.com/helpme to learn more about how we can help you in that journey of turning your dream into a reality. Again, that's jumblethink.com/helpme. And let's start the journey of turning your big idea and dream into the reality you've always wanted it to be. Now let's jump back into our second segment with Ryan Williams. We are back with Ryan Williams, and he is the CEO and founder of the Influence Economy. Super cool to have you back to talk more about topics. For segment 2, we're going to be diving into influence and depression and collaboration and so much more. But I really want to start out by talking about the things that influence us as children and how it impacts us as adults. For me, I think back to my childhood, and part of the reason I love like New York City and I love media and communication so much is because I looked up to David Letterman as the guy who was able to communicate. And recently you were able to meet and encounter a childhood hero for you. So tell us about that story.
Yeah. And by the way, totally agree. Like Late Night with David Letterman, the top 10 lists were I used to buy those books of all the top 10 lists and like go through them with my family. And and so Larry King and I, someone I used to call growing up in the Midwest, I called his radio show.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know that before he got on CNN and became this global figure, he was a radio host for decades.
Right.
He had the show in Washington, D.C. I'd call from Des Moines, Iowa.
And didn't he have a show in like Fort Lauderdale when like way early in his career?
Yeah, exactly. He was a Florida guy, Miami.
Yeah.
And was friends with Jackie Gleason and has these great stories where he was Florida for a while and then went up to Washington D.C. where he was on CNN and he did the radio show from there. I would call. I was the Red Baron. He gave me a nickname. Very high pitched voice, 11-year-old kid. I'm calling at 1 a.m. because it was during an Open Phones America segment.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
recording it on, dating me. I was recording it not on a laptop, but on one of those Sony yellow boom boxes that was like
Right.
water resistant and
Yeah.
the Walkman style. So I'm in there calling him on the Red Baron. I'm high pitched guy. I'm talking about sports and who knows what. And he invites me to dinner in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And he puts me on hold. And he's like, hey, if you're in D.C., I go to this restaurant called Duke Zebert's. It's an old steakhouse, since gone out of business. And so I threw on my red sweater, and my family was visiting our cousins in Washington, D.C. in the summer. And we all got our Sunday best on, and we went to Duke Zebert's Steakhouse and hung out with Larry King.
Wow. Wow.
And then a couple years later, my mom ran into him randomly at a restaurant and said, hey, I'm the Red Baron's mom. And he's like, the Red Baron's mom? How's that kid doing? And so at that point, I'm like 15, and he invites us to the TV show when we were in Washington, D.C. And so these funny encounters, you chalk it up like, oh, that's a good story. And, a little bit random. You can't really, you can't contextualize that like at a party. People don't get it. And then suddenly I'm in LA. I live here now. He's in Beverly Hills. A friend of a friend connected us. We had breakfast a couple weeks back.
Wow.
And he's like, the Red Baron, I'm wearing a red vest for you. And the Red Baron returns. And he's really happy because I'm essentially, my wife was joking, I'm like his biggest fanboy. I'm over here telling everyone at the table about how I used to like worship this guy and call his radio show as like a prepubescent 11-year-old dude.
Yeah.
And so he's like, the Red Baron's welcome anytime at the breakfast. And so I'm like, this is amazing. I can't even express this to people. This is so crazy. And now I'm writing a chapter in the book, my next book about storytelling, how all of us need to think about our stories and how ongoing our stories are.
Wow.
And we can't think of them as ending. And we need to be persistent and purposeful with how we run our life, because you never know where things can end up. Yeah. And I never knew I'd meet Larry. I knew I'd actually tried to reach him before, and I got turned down.
Wow.
So this was a very accidental encounter. And so I feel like, a lot of us, tying it back to the first segment, I have a term, we need to think about being unintentionally rich.
Wow. Okay.
And where being intentionally rich, it's very methodical. People want to formulate their life, but that's often defined by money. Mm-hmm. And when the people I profile in my book they're unintentionally rich, meaning they just happen to have these situations come to them. And I feel like that's, richness in friends, your network, and obviously money. And so that was an unintentional encounter that really was intentional, because I tried to meet him, but because it was so spontaneous in the moment, the Red Baron returns. It was something that Larry just, ran with.
Yeah. That's so crazy. And it's amazing. I love how you said there that our stories are continuums. They don't necessarily end the way we expect, and sometimes they resurge or return in a way that's unexpected. And when we try to make something happen, sometimes it doesn't. But when things are in the right season, right time for a new chapter of that story, it comes back and re-enters our life. It's a weird journey we're on as humans to live in this place of story, and often we're so looking to the future or looking to the past that we're not present in the moment. Tell us a little bit about this new journey of incorporating story into what you're doing at a higher level than what you've done in the past. What are some of the discoveries you're making about storytelling, being effective in it, and how that draws your audience, draws your customers, draws your clients into being a part of what you're doing?
Well, I love the fact your podcast is about the story of ideas. And that's really where, the thesis of my work comes, is how do you make ideas happen and executable? So the best ideas don't always win, as we know.
Yeah.
But often the best stories win, the best compelling narratives, the best emotional reactions you can elicit from people. And you have a very quick snap judgment that people give you oftentimes within 2-3 minutes. And my research have shown, talking to story experts that do this for a living, that are professional speechwriters, that have worked with some, big executives, that emotion is what matters.
Okay.
Really emotion, connecting with people on an emotional level that matters, and being memorable whether they agree or disagree, like you or not, is more important than being just there and a bland fly on the wall type person that isn't memorable. Because if I'm a firm believer, like when I give a talk, I'd like to know quickly if you like me or not.
Okay.
And I can try to win you over, or I can just give up on you. But at the very least, I want you to make that decision very early on. So then I can find the people that self-select that I could find to be a collaborator in the long run. And most people, they're neutral, they're lukewarm, but being bold with your story in a way that resonates with others, I call that everyone needs an underdog story, a tearjerker.
Yeah.
A way for you to connect emotionally, because we all empathize with people that overcome great obstacles to succeed.
Often we rely on the facts of the story, and we're telling very linear kind of stories in our storytelling process. This happened, then this happened, and then this happened. How can we do what you're saying and really draw emotion into the story so that people empathize, sympathize, or feel like they can relate to the story as you're telling it? How can we really wrap ourselves in moving past the facts and incorporating the untangible parts, because it's so hard to process that?
Yeah, 100%. Like what you're saying is disrespectful to people to give them a list of items for your story.
Yeah.
And nothing worse when you're at with your in-laws or your family or your cousins, and you always get that one person who waits for you to finish your story and then doesn't even take a deep breath, and then it launches into their story.
Yeah.
Because they're not even listening to what you had to say, or they ask you a question just so they can tell you their story, and they're not good listeners.
Okay.
Where most of us, we try to have a collaborative conversation where there's give and take, and it ebb and flows naturally. And so I think it's disrespectful to not listen to people, and it's condescending to give people lists of items.
Okay.
And you can't think of your story as bullet points.
Okay.
And using screenplays, as someone who's works in Los Angeles, there's a 3-act structure. Every story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you're overselling your beginning, or you're going on too long in the middle, just end it. Walk away. Because people would rather have a story end well, where they forget all the boring listing that you made in the middle of the story. They're going to remember the ending.
Right.
And that's what matters. That really what matters is tying it up in a way that makes sense to people so they can share it with others, and there's closure to that conversation.
They're waiting for the punchline, and you're still working on the setup in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's a joke that my mom has about my dad, who he tells very long-winded stories, that you ask my dad what time it is, and he tells you how to build a watch.
That's fun. In this kind of explanation of crafting emotion and not being bullet points, you talked about that storytelling as a collaboration. I love that imagery, because so often we think of storytelling being one-sided. I'm telling you a story, or they're telling me a story, and it's all about the storyteller. But often we forget that the hero of the story is really the audience. It's the story you're telling is all about connecting with them. How can we be better in the process of storytelling or engaging with people where we collaborate instead of create a monologue or a single-sided story in which we're not connecting with the audience?
Yeah, I talk a lot about Hollywood in my context, because I interview people that are professional pitchers, and they pitch TV shows. Like I've talked to a writer on CSI Miami, and he's written in Hollywood for 10 years. And he was saying that you need to have a conversational pitch in your back pocket at all times.
Yeah.
And that's somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes. And that isn't an elevator pitch. That isn't, I only have 30 seconds to cram every detail into this finite amount of time we have together, because you're never going to talk to me again.
Right.
That is having the confidence to be bold in conversation, where you authentically are telling your story in the moment, and you've rehearsed it.
Yeah.
And you've practiced it. And the mentality is, if I go see the Rolling Stones, I want to hear the greatest hits.
Yeah.
Satisfaction, Jumping Jack Flash. What I don't want to hear is Mick Jagger's new acoustic song.
Yeah.
I could care less about Keith Richards' solo project.
Right.
And you need to think about making your greatest hits. and having stories with purpose that matter, and you're not going to just spit them out because you've rehearsed them, but they're authentic to you. And in that moment, they're the right decision you make to tell that story.
Okay. So it's understanding placement of that story. It's understanding when it's the right time to share that story. But there's a part that I think that you're saying, but not saying in a way. And that's the fact that sometimes you're inviting people into the story and you tell that story, but then it's up to them on how they respond. So in the case that the example you gave here, you've got 2 minutes. You're inviting someone to continue the conversation past the 2 minutes you've just shared.
Absolutely. And the word I use is you want them to opt in.
Right.
You want them to sign up for the story.
Yeah.
And if they're not receptive, take a break, come back to them later, or just move on. I mean, there's how many billions of people on the earth, how many people, like none of us are desperate. We're lucky in that, there's a limitless amount of clients or customers or collaborators out there. And it's like it's like, Tinder or, speed dating. A lot of us treat networking very, very much like a bubble gum. It's a quick sugar rush, but we don't have meaning behind it. And so you really need to delineate like who's listening, who's paying attention, and equally, do you have empathy for the other person? Where you want to know what you get in their shoes. Yeah. What are they saying? Like this, I interviewed a guy, Billy Ray. He's a director, and he wrote the movie script for Captain Phillips. He also got nominated for an Oscar for Hunger Games. And he was saying when he goes into a meeting, he has to get in the other person's shoes. He's often pitching producers. He needs to show them, hey, I'm going to write a script that's going to be tight. I'm going to bring in the film under budget if I'm directing it. And I can manage the talent and the crew and all the stress of a set, because he needs that producer to go to the producer's boss to convey the message. And he needs to have empathy and understanding and be in the other person's shoes to know, hey, what can I tell them that they can relay the message that I am going to execute and deliver?
We've talked a little bit about influencing in a broad sense. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into this because often we're moving into a new season of history, and influence is moving from a peer-to-peer, face-to-face, traditional media kind of methodology, and it's moving into a new philosophy, a new way of doing it through social channels. And I was watching your Google talk that you gave, and you were sharing a little bit about how the people that we see as influencers today are really diluting or watering down the definition of influence and what it really means and what an influencer really is. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, the word influencer in general has been sullied in a way where it to many people, it's been ruined by advertisers and marketers and people who are famous, and they want quick deals. They want to pay to tweet about your product. And there was a time where I was getting pitched influencer marketing startups like twice a week, and everyone wants to make a quick buck. They want to monetize their following. And so, the word has been stolen by a bunch of executives in a room that want to pay people to tweet about products. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because I look at influence as, game changing, opening up leads, opportunities, collaborations in a way that can really turbocharge whatever you're doing in your life. And unfortunately, it's been branded in a way where influencer means just influencer paying for product placements and making a buck. And really, in the long run, you want people to love what you do, right? To champion on your behalf and work for you versus making a couple bucks over 3 months to be a media buy.
Yeah, for sure. So how do we redeem that? How do we take back? Because there are influencers out there who are sharing messages. I mean, that's what TED Talks is all about, sharing messages that matter. You've been a part of South by Southwest, and so here is a place where you're getting people and culture and the arts and all kinds of different spaces together to share ideas, share music, share what they're creating. How do we take the philosophies that are being used in those kind of situations and apply it to life so that we go beyond the Facebook post, we go beyond the Twitter feed, we go beyond the picture on Instagram? How do we really redeem that place of influence for things, movements, messages, products, services How do we bring that back and really bring value to those spaces again in a deluged, let's just dump content out there kind of culture?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely deluged with crappy content, cheaply made,
right,
to get us to like stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a vanity metric. Likes are for our ego, impressions are for advertisers, and followers are for celebrities.
Yeah.
Because we all want to act like we have influence.
Yeah.
And none of that matters in the end, because influence is making a dent in the world. And it's looking back, and maybe Google in 10 years, you're looking for your name, and the stuff that matters pops up. And so I look at, the power of your story and how you can solve problems for other people is really the best way to grow influence. And that comes through collaboration and using that term opt-in and having people believe in you. And so, Seth Godin, great writer, he talks about how, we all form around tribes. And tribes, you need a shared vision and a way to communicate.
Yeah.
And I add a third layer to that. In my research, I found that collaboration is that third layer. And, for example, I'm on your podcast, we're working together. There's no monetary exchange here, but we're collabing.
Yeah.
And there's a great term that YouTubers use. It's called the collab.
Okay.
And it's when people appear on each other's channels.
Yeah.
And so if you have a YouTube channel of 1 million subscribers, like, what's a hobby of yours?
Guitar making.
So let's say you have a guitar making hobby and you have 1 million subscribers because you make these elaborate guitars and they've been used by Keith Richards.
Okay.
And he's on your channel and you collab with all these really interesting people. Let's say I have 1,000 subscribers. My channel is on guitar playing hip hop songs.
Yeah.
And very niche. It's called Ryan's Hip Hop Jams. And yours is Guitar Making Guru.
Okay.
So you collab with me. You come on my channel, 1,000 subscribers, very niche. But you want to help me pay it forward. And you get a niche audience really into you. I go on your channel, it's game changing.
Yeah.
I'm getting 1 million subscriber reach and I'm collabing with you going on your network and you're helping me really raise my profile. And that's where influence comes. It's that kind of collab mentality where it could be you making an introduction for me and I'm helping you with a LinkedIn reference. It could be I leave a testimonial for you. It could be I appear on your YouTube channel, right? But most of us don't have that kind of a platform.
Right.
So it's really, where do we go where I'm solving a problem for you, you're solving a problem for me. And that's where influence really grows through that collab.
Okay. So earlier on, you were mentioning like, hey, you don't want to come off as the person who it's like, I'm trying to sell to you, you're trying to sell to me. You really want to come off as the person that is coming into this place of collaboration. How do we foster and build relationships that are healthy, that protect those boundaries, but also position us to get into places of influence? Because like I may go on to, let's say, Seth Godin or James Altucher. If I were to be invited onto their podcast, they are giving me so much more than I can give them. How do we balance that? And how do we build those relationships so that we're not taking advantage of each other, but we're really honoring each other in that situation?
Yeah, that's a very complicated answer because I get mad about that, to be completely honest. I think I hate the food chain mentality.
Yeah.
And where people say, "Oh, you're not worthy of me," but I'm worthy of you.
Okay.
And so going on, let's say Seth Godin's podcast, you got to be very established, be buttoned up, have your act together, and written books, built very interesting ideas or businesses. And so the criteria is high for Seth because he has more to lose.
Right.
His credibility is bigger than ours.
Yeah.
Sadly, at this point in the game.
Right.
Who knows in a couple of years, things will change for us, where maybe Seth Godin would invite us on the podcast.
Yeah.
However, if you can get your foot in the door with Seth and have him on your podcast or interview him for your book or reach out to him in an authentic way, I've interviewed him and it was a great experience. And so I have his email and I can contact him and I've sent him a copy of my book, which he didn't have time to read. He said he was really busy, but still I got the book to him.
Yeah.
And if we're going to reach a point where, James can give a lot to us, I feel like that's a fractured mentality that doesn't help us because it's almost like we're overvaluing James's podcast. Nothing against James. I'd love to appear on his show and I've interviewed him. However, I think that's where a lot of us, myself very much included, we overvalue people. And so we think James is opening up channels for us, but what can we do for him? Or can we find an aggregate of podcasts that equal James's input that are undervalued moneyballer type influencers?
Okay.
And go on 20 of those shows.
Yeah.
And really pay our dues, get our respect, and then maybe James invites us. And then we're going to deliver amazing content for James. And we're going to over-deliver. We're going to blow his mind because we've done the hard work to earn that opportunity to be on his show.
Right. I think that's so good. And I love that you're bringing up a deeper issue, and that's understanding value of ourselves, of each other, seeing each other how we should be seeing each other instead of putting a value that's superficial on the relationship. And I think that really pivots to a great conversation. And that's an important conversation. The week that we're recording this, we lost more than two people to suicide that are influential. And they're leaving a hole in people's lives and in the media space. How does value and depression go hand in hand? And how can we really start solving this issue where people don't understand their value to the point of, or they're dealing with too much, or they have these beliefs that aren't true? How can we start really seeing each other and catching these issues of depression that lead to catastrophic moments?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard because if I'm overweight, you can see that. Right. If I'm not running, if I'm drinking a lot, you can watch me be an alcoholic. If I'm a diabetic, I can be diagnosed with, finding insulin and injecting myself to help myself and process sugar. And depression is not as straightforward. And it involves an emotional vulnerability, talking to other people and being honest. And I think that, I feel like a lot of us, like Anthony Bourdain, who passed away and, he's no longer with us. He seemed like a very happy person. And you never would have thought. He's invited us into his life.
Right.
He's given people inspiration around food and giving you an opportunity to explore a journey for yourself. So it's really troubling to think that we didn't know this because we're not friends with him. Right. We have no window into his real life. He is putting on a show for us. Yeah. But he was so authentic in that it's troubling. Yeah. And there's just, all of us really need to have a little more empathy for one another. And that's easy to say, right? Oh, because it's so frustrating sometimes to deal with people that complain or gripe or seem troubled. But I think that, I recommend always trying to seek a professional, sometimes coaching can help, professional coach, a therapist, someone who's a professional outside of your social network, your family and your friends to talk to, because that's where you can get help. And there's still a stigma. It's unfortunate. I mean, I've gone to therapy for years and I'm not afraid to admit it. However, when I tell some people, they get worried about me. Oh, Ryan, are you doing okay? I did an episode on my podcast about my mental health and fitness and depression, and people got worried about me. Wow. And that's great. They care, but it's like, well, getting worried about me doesn't help. I mean, being a consistent friend or ally or colleague helps in my life. And I think, another way to really get out there is I think you got to dedicate time to yourself. That's maybe going on a run, meditating, yoga, going to the gym, getting your body fit. And that's where, a lot of us, it's so easy to go home, have a beer and not deal with life. But really, self-care matters. It's critical for all of us.
Well, and I think, I've talked about this on this podcast, is that we're in a cultural time in history in which we've bred false intimacy without responsibility. So you look at Bourdain or even the example where you shared on your podcast. Now, all of a sudden, people feel like they have an intimacy, but they have no responsibility to be a part of that story. And for the long story, for the long game. And I think we need to get back to a place as a culture where we understand that intimacy also breeds responsibility. And the more somebody opens up and is vulnerable in those situations, the more responsibility that we need to take on for that relationship at that point.
Yeah, I think that, responsibility or helping others be accountable
Yeah.
and supporting them, and saying, checking in with people, like, how is that thing you're doing?
Yeah.
How is that project you're working? Are you still podcasting? Are you still working that job? I think that those check-ins really do matter, right? And it's helping you get through and self-talking and telling yourself you're going to finish this thing you're working on. And yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point you bring up about social media and this sense of intimacy, but there is no, I mean, if I like your stuff on Instagram, I don't care about you necessarily.
Right.
I just think your baby's cute, or like you got married or you're in the Bahamas and I'm really happy that you're there and jealous I'm not there. And all these conflicting emotions come from social media and this false sense of intimacy that isn't grounded in actual human contact, interaction, and partnership.
Right.
Actually, real quick, I used to remind me of something. I had a friend who listened to that episode about me talking about mental health.
Yeah.
And he like apologized. He's like, he said sorry. He's like, I had no idea.
Wow.
And he's like, I had no idea you were going through that.
Wow.
And so it's hard to really tell people because you may not even know you're going through it.
Yeah.
And so that's like, it's a challenge. And I think that's where, helping to identify it in yourself really matters as well.
Absolutely. Such an important topic. And I'm glad that people are starting to talk about it. I hope that this isn't just a blip in time, just like it was when Robin Williams took his life and when others have, where the conversation comes up very in front of us and then dissipates. I hope that this is the start of more conversations for the long haul.
Yeah, I would love to think that. Yeah, I hope so.
I want to make sure that we take a moment and talk about your book, which is super cool, the Influencer Economy book. And one of the great takeaways from it is the launch, collaborate, thrive mentality. We've talked a lot about collaboration. First off, who's the book for? And secondly, what can they take away from it?
Yeah, the book is for people that have ideas and they're figuring out how to make their stories better around their ideas, how to launch their ideas, and then how to collaborate with others to elevate the profile of yourself and others, and win-win mentality. That's that share step. And then the third step of thriving is really, how do you maintain? How do you meet people in real life? How do you build your network? Keep collaborating with others. How do you find underserved communities that you can help elevate their voices, or maybe underrepresented people that are not getting the acclaim they deserve, but just as talented? And mental health that's an area that I like to focus on. That's undervalued, I think, in society. And so the 3 steps are a framework for all of us to really execute and do the work. Instead of, how many people do you know that say comments that are so dumb, like, I thought about Uber 8 years ago. I can't believe that it's so successful. Or I had the idea for Blue Apron, and they didn't do anything for it. They just let it go. And you really need to make your ideas more real if they're actually going to happen.
Love that. Make your ideas real. That is such a powerful statement right there.
Yeah, we're at the point now where buying a website's easy, getting a logo, naming it, getting feedback on your product, getting your, if you already have a successful business, working with your customers to get them invested emotionally in what you're doing. And we're in a very exciting time. It's a very stressful time because it's so noisy, but it's also, you got to stand out. And I've said this before, you got to be bold.
Yeah.
Boldness matters. People, if you're bold and people disagree with you, that's better than not being bold.
Yeah. Yeah. Stand for something instead of
represent something. And being ordinary, it doesn't help you. I mean, sadly, I'd love to say that you and I are inventing something brand new and we're changing the world. I mean, I like to think that, but many of us are collaborating and we're curating and we're generating with others. And Seth Godin, however brilliant he is just packaging stuff in a new way. And we all can do that. I mean, 100%, everyone listening can do that. So don't think of these things as daunting tasks that are impossible. Think about James Altucher's repackaging a lot of great stuff and adding his own elements to it and being bold with it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
Hope you didn't take offense that we don't have any new ideas.
no, no, the moment I think I have a new idea, often, I mean, there's been a couple things where I'm like, well, that's a new interpretation or new application of something, but
right.
But beyond that, most of the time it's like I have this new discovery, and it's just a new discovery for me that probably is a new discovery for a lot of people, but not a new discovery for everyone.
But even having your own angle or framework around it, that's new.
Yeah.
Right. That does. I mean, having a breakthrough does matter. It's just a matter of, where your breakthrough helps you to separate from others who are doing something mostly very similar to you.
Right. For sure. We are, of course, talking about influence. You've worked with a lot of influencers. You helped Snoop Dogg with his podcast. You've helped other influencers. You are an influencer yourself. You've been involved with major events, and you've had tons of influencers that you've worked with. If there was one thing that stood out to you as part of your story and your journey that you would want to encourage us with, what would that be as a culture that our community is all about doing something special and being innovative? What would be that thing that you would want to challenge us with?
I would consider what you've done curiously in your past.
Okay.
Like, what was a curiosity as a kid, high school, if you went to college, professionally? Did you start a blog on the side? I used to freestyle rap when I was a kid.
Wow, cool.
And in Des Moines, Iowa, right, of all places.
Yeah.
There was a guy, freestyle rap. His name's Ryan Ford, and we called him Fat Rat. I was Rhino, and I've since then rapped at my wedding and friends' weddings and it's just a thing that I did. It's so fun and random, but like also completely surprising to people, which is why it works. I rapped with Ryan Ford. He now lives in LA.
Yeah.
He is the chief creative officer at Snoop Dogg's ad agency.
Wow.
And that collaboration is why I worked with Snoop Dogg.
Wow. Crazy.
And that's what we have in common, Ryan and I. We didn't talk for 10 years, but we had this funny moment of freestyle rapping in the middle of the Midwest. And so I think most of us undervalue these curiosities, these random things that we did that made us unique.
Yeah.
Because we grow up, we get old, we have kids, we have stress.
Yeah.
And those are the curiosities that really can game change you that we mostly, I believe, myself included, undervalue.
Yeah, for sure. So good. So good. We mentioned the book. We mentioned your business. How can people find and connect with you?
They can find me on the web, influencereconomy.com is my website, and my podcast. You search for Ryan Williams and it pops up. I'd be happy if I have a story checklist for how to tell 3 stories like a badass.
Yeah.
Which I can give your community. I can make a link.
Yeah.
That I'll send you, influencereconomy.com/jumblethink.
Okay.
And I can give people a free checklist, how to tell the 3 stories like a badass.
Yeah.
And that's where I live. I'm like you. We're everywhere. Amazon, iTunes, the web.
Nice. And we'll put all the links in the episode notes so that it's easy to find all of these things for you, the listener. And we'll be right back with Ryan Williams and our rapid fire questions. I hope that you're enjoying today's episode with Ryan Williams. If you're new to the Jumble Think podcast, we have a ton of incredible past guests. Here are a few that you may specifically enjoy if you're enjoying today's episode. In Season 2, Episode 40, our guest was Jeremy Ryan Slade. He's also a good friend of ours. He is the founder of Create Your Brand Media and also the Create Your Own Life podcast. In that episode, we talked about creating work with purpose. In Season 1, Episode 68, our guest was comedian Andy Beckerman. It's a super funny episode. He talks about growing up Jewish in an Amish world, and we also talk about the business of comedy. Super fun, so check that one out. Another episode you may like is Season 1, Episode 72 with Eddie Yoon. Eddie is a specialist in growth strategies and is really well known as a thought leader in the space of super consumers and how you can utilize them to grow your business. These are 3 great episodes that you may enjoy, but we have over 150 other episodes currently live, so check out any of them. I think you're going to love them, and thanks for tuning into the Jumble Think podcast. Now let's jump back into rapid fire questions with our guest, Ryan Williams. We're back with Ryan Williams and rapid fire questions. Ryan, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Okay, the first question is, what is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
I would make it real. I would tell people in your trusted network about it. I'd buy a web domain, make a logo, brand it, write a blog post about it, make a video about it, share it with others that you trust, and make it happen now. And the more you document it, create it, and own it, the more likely you're going to figure out if it's a good idea or if it's a terrible idea.
What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
I would like people to have more empathy for others and not be judgmental on social media. I think bullying is so much different and worse now because of social media.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy just to be mean and hide online.
Yeah.
And so I'd like people to treat each other like they would in real life, face to face, versus hiding behind a profile or an avatar or a Twitter account.
So good. What do you want your legacy to be?
The legacy, I believe, I mean, obviously I want to, be a great person for my family, my children, my wife, and anyone around me, my friends. That's the huge thing. But in my business, I would love to help people tell better stories about themselves.
Yeah.
And champion other people's stories in a way where I could walk away with a conversation with you or anyone else and they feel like, okay, I have my shit a little bit more together with presenting myself today than I did yesterday.
Cool. Very cool. Where do you find inspiration?
I find inspiration through conversation with other people. I mean, the easy answer is to say my children.
Okay.
But a better answer would be to people. I work at a co-working space.
Yeah.
I have a lot of random people that I talk to during the day.
Yeah.
And I get energy from them. I think that it's helpful to get feedback on emails you're sending to people, just generally running things by others to get a perspective that's different than yours. And so I get a lot of inspiration and I get fired up and psyched to talk to other people, share business ideas in a way that's not monetary, where we're generally just collaborating and collabing and helping each other.
What is one book that you think every dreamer or entrepreneur should read and why?
That's a great question. I love so many books. One book I really like is called Made to Stick by the Heath brothers.
I haven't heard of that one.
It's all about, it's like, they call it like the follow-up to The Tipping Point.
Okay.
And they're two professors. I think one's in North Carolina, one's in California. And it's all about how to make your ideas stick. And they talk about how, one piece of advice is like to fill in the knowledge gap when you're telling stories to people.
Yeah.
So you tell a story differently to your mom than I would to you in the Jumble Think community because you know more about online than my mom. And it's just got a lot of takeaway value that it's easy to process.
That's really cool. I'll have to check that out. What is one tool that is significant for the success of your business?
My email client, having an email list is fundamental to everything I do. Okay. As it is with most people that own businesses. So the email list, social media goes away. Twitter is it's spammy. Facebook, they make you pay ads to get seen. Instagram now is becoming more of an ad network. But inboxes are free and you don't have to pay to send people emails.
What is one habit you find helpful in your life as an entrepreneur?
My ability that I pride myself on is to bring people together. Okay. And I've done this from a long time in my life, and I can bring people together and provide value. And I've figured out a way to get paid doing that.
Okay. Cool. How do you start and finish your day?
Start my day getting woken up. Usually someone jumps on me in my bed or yells at me to get up. It depends on who's speaking, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, or my wife. Right. And then I make coffee and usually breakfast. Okay. And take my kids to their daycare. Okay. End my day, it depends. Working, watching Netflix. Sadly, it's usually on my phone. Okay. Like in my bed, which is a terrible habit.
Yeah. I do it too. I think most of us do, if we're really honest.
Yeah. Not good for the brain.
No. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
Crying? No, I would be crying to myself to sleep. No, I would. I mean, there's a couple tracks. One would be I'd be a corporate person working a job at a big company. Yeah. and making a lot of money and having a very secure life that my wife would love. Another track would be a struggling, depressed stand-up comedian that was in and out of entertainment career jobs and really not happy.
Yeah.
So I think most options would not lead to purpose and fulfillment.
Our final rapid fire question is, what is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
The one dream, that's a really good question. And I'll keep it, again, business related, because we could easily say, oh, I want to travel with my kids, or, open a museum or do something altruistic, which I do want to do.
Cool dreams. All very cool dreams.
Those are great dreams. I think, one thing is I want to make money for others and myself around wellness. And it's so hard to break through that world because people aren't necessarily paying for wellness. Or I do some executive coaching, in which I am a psychiatrist at times, or a psychologist at times, because people need coaching and motivation. And I do my talks as well. Or I feel like I can't be a motivational speaker because I think motivation just needs to be a byproduct of everything you do. Yeah. If you want to work with people. But I'd love to do something bigger in the mental awareness, wellness, health space.
Oh, very
that could be a long-lasting impact.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with our final thoughts. So what is your final thought for us today?
The final thought is I always think about my stand-up comedy days and what I learned and what I didn't learn. And I think that, you go to a comedy show and people, they always seem very well rehearsed. And what you realize is these comedians practice their set 50 times at open mic nights. They usually have a note card or a coaster to rest their alcoholic beverage on their stool. It could even be a fake beer, or it could be a fake drink, like gin and tonic is really just tonic water and a lemon. Yeah. But they have a note card or a set list, usually on their cocktail napkin.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a little known fact that you get lost, right? Because you're talking to the crowd and you're going on tangents. And that set list anchors everything you're doing.
That's crazy.
I think that you, as a business person or a leader or anyone with ideas, you have to follow your set. Okay. And it's not your heart. It's not even always your gut, or it's not even your mind. It's your set. It's like, I rehearsed this. I practiced this. It's my joke I tell every time when I close the show, because the joke you tell or the story you tell or the work you do is new to the people that are hearing it for the first time. Right.
Right. That's so good. And a tip that none of us really knew about, if you're not in it, you just see it and you just go, oh, these guys have it all together. But that little trick, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Ryan, it's been a lot of fun having you on the podcast today. Thanks for taking time out and giving us some really powerful insights into the world of influence and how we can approach it better.
I love being here. Great interview, my friend. So I look forward to collaborating again.
Once again, we want to thank today's guest, Ryan Williams, for taking time out, sharing his story, and giving us amazing insights into the world of influence. If you want to learn more about Ryan, make sure you check the episode notes where you can find all the links and connect with him. Make sure to check out next week's episodes with Michael Levitt and Leon Logothesis. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with a final thought about influence. It comes from Napoleon Hill. He says, think twice before you speak, because your words and influence will plant the seed of either success or failure in the mind of another. That's such a great reminder for all of us on how we speak, how we treat each other, and how our words impact their success and their failures. So today, I want to encourage you, go out there, make some steps, small steps, big steps, but nonetheless some steps to moving your big ideas and dreams forward and changing the world around you. Thanks again for tuning in. Now get out there and change the world.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.